Okay, we are now recording. Welcome to this Retrieval Market demo day. Today's date is Wednesday, the 13th of October. And we've got an incredible lineup today. We have got, firstly, Myel speaking about paid retrievals and maybe Cloudflare worker retrieval. And then Ken Labs speaking about the IPFS crawler and IPFS indexing work they've been working on. As we always do, please put any questions into the Retrieval Market Slack channel on the Filecoin Slack, and we can make comments and answer them asynchronously, firstly during the meeting and then after the meeting for anyone who isn't able to attend. So without delaying any longer, over to you, Thomas and Myel.
Cool, thanks. Let me share my screen. All right, so for this one, I'm going to be demoing some paid retrievals. So this is kind of the JavaScript client that we've been working on over the last few months, and we're finally getting a few payments through the Filecoin payment channels going through. So this client is basically connected to the Filecoin mainnet. So this demo will be on mainnet, and it's running into a service worker, which allows us to run on a different background thread, so it doesn't slow down the web page. So I'm kind of going to load a few small files. These are all kind of icons, and so basically they're all individual SVG files that have been added together. And so I just kind of, this was just basically retrieving them individually. So there's a few interesting things happening here. One of them is I'm actually loading from an existing payment channel. So my payment channel already has funds in it, so I don't actually need to wait for it to load, which allows us to load this page immediately. So we have a few interesting concepts. So for example, this payment channel has already been used for other retrievals. So it has kind of this concept of lanes. So I'm already kind of checking and verifying that the payment channel is between the right parties. So my client and the provider, and then I can assign a new lane based on what lanes already exist. And then basically, initially, I make a first payment to, which is kind of a tiny payment, 300 autofills. So it's basically just allowing me to retrieve the entries and then figure out what files are in this entry. So then from there, I can target the specific CIDs. And so there's actually 5 retrievals happening in parallel for this. Actually, the first one is first getting the entries, and then the four ones for all these files are happening simultaneously. And then once it's completed, essentially, I've sent all my payment vouchers to the provider. And then the provider is just, it's on the provider's end to kind of settle this and, redeem the vouchers. So we're still kind of working on the process of, updating the payment channels once the retrieval is done, and when to basically settle them and collect the funds on the provider's end, because we want to keep the payment channel open for as long as possible so that we can use it for multiple transfers, and in order to also save gas. So another thing that we're working on is, for example, merging the lanes together so we can redeem the vouchers as a single transaction. Because, for example, all of these are individual vouchers on the separate lanes. So these could be combined into one lane, and so one message to redeem the entire funds. So this is working pretty well at the moment. There's still a few things to basically adjust in terms of how many lanes we want to use, and then basically at which point do we want to collect and settle and collect the channels. So this is kind of all the demo for today for us. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much. And yeah, any questions, please just drop them on the Slack channel, and we can also go over them at the end if we've got time. And yeah, next, over to Ken Labs.
Hey guys, so I'm William from Ken Labs. So I'm also going to present you some items in this demo. So first of all, it's the indexing performance testing. We rephrase, and this is the phase one. So the other thing is the IPFS sniffer, also known as crawler. So with monitoring enabled, we'll also show you the trend about how much or how many CIDs and the providers we capture, and how the progress looks like. Okay, so first of all, this is the performance testing phase one. We have implement a test suite for the end-to-end testing. So it's based on Rubber framework. So idea is that we can set up the different scenarios for different file size, 10 megabytes, 100, and 1 gigabytes and 10. Okay, so this is how we plan to do it for the future. We haven't run the actual testing and get a report. So probably we will have more detailed report and the output to share in the short future. And yeah, this is the other thing I want to share. So this is the IPFS sniffer with monitoring enabled. We have done a couple of PRs, a code change in IPFS, and we are using the most of the lower layer modules or components of IPFS. So for the POC and the quick development, so we didn't split them from the IPFS. So in general, we collect the following metrics. So total providers we captured or collected, and total sits with provider found and indexed. So we don't have the index for the total sits captured, including provider found or not. And so this is the three metrics we have. So if you see, it may be too small. I can show you in the runtime. So here, this is the dashboard we set up. So you can see the trend here. It's growing slowly here, and you can see in the very beginning it's growing dramatically. And because it's not linear, so we are using the logarithmic what's called scale type. So you can see here it's kind of getting flat here. So in general, it's slowly growing. And we have three metrics here. So total provider, which is a green curve here, and the total record. It's a yellow curve. You may not be able to see because it exactly match the total record upload, which is a blue curve here. So you can see the matches totally match. This means so all the records or the sets found have been uploaded and indexed in time rows. So there won't be any mismatch here. So that's like a perfect curve. And this is the total provider. So see the number here, it's less than 20,000 compared to the total providers here. So it's much less in the providers data. So it may be somehow confusing. That's because the total providers means the unique providers of CID. So each provider may have multiple loads of sets. So it's much less than the CID. So this is why you see the huge gap here. And if I try to change the type here, you can see it more clearly or make more sense to you. And yes, so if I change to linear, so you can see how it grows here compared to the seed found. So the unique providers are much less. And the providers, we can also treat them as unique peers. So like the peers we found in the network. So all these data have been indexed in time rows backend. And how it's done, we can see from the logs. So we don't have the architecture diagram yet, but from the logs, I can show you that we listen to the request from the network. So we collected CID from one list. And once we have the CID, we look for the provider. So this is in general how it works. So here we find providers. This is the peer ID, and this is the CID. So any pair we find will be saved to the time rows backend. So this is how it works in the IPFS daemon. And it's running, constantly running and collecting data from the network. So this is the first step of the crawler. We have the set and the provider. The next step will be recognize the file type, collect file metadata, for example, from the gateway, so that we can recognize if this is a file, we can index or we can do the full text index. If yes, we will proceed and retrieve the file content, push to the full text indexing service so that it can be full text indexed in our time rows backend. Eventually, users should be able to search from our front end, the search engine. So this is how we collect data or crawl the network on IPFS network. Yeah. So this is the current status. The next step is that so this is one of the tasks we have planned. So we haven't made it. We haven't found time to finish. So the pop-up mechanism. The other thing is a sniffer code refactor. So for demonstration purpose, so we have hard-coded some of the configuration. So to make it more flexible, so we have a plan for the code refactor and the configuration support. So these are the items we want to introduce, including the basic functionality or the configuration items and the premise use setup. So yeah, that's all the effort from Ben and Xiaohua Zhang. So I really want to thank them to the development and make it happen. Okay, I think, yeah, as usual, the QA will go to the Slack. Thank you, guys.
Great, thanks very much. Let me just check Slack, see if anything's come through. I don't believe anyone has added anything on Slack. Slack channel is the Retrieval Markets one on the Filecoin Slack. But if anyone has got a question for Zoom or just to have on the recording, is there anything that anyone would like to bring up now? I've got one for Ken Labs. So actually I've got two. First question is, just for my clarity, is there a difference between the sniffer and a crawler? Or do we use those words interchangeably?
To be honest, it should be the same concept or the same to what we are working on or we have been working on. So sniffer, more, I think for us, sniffer is more focusing on the listening on the network, and crawler means we act based on what we collect. So we listen to the network and we collect content or data from the network. For this product, the feature, I probably will say we should use a crawler in the future to make them more official and avoid any confusion.
Okay, thanks. And then my second question is just wondering how, Will, maybe you could pitch in on this. How does this relate to the store the index work that and the indexing stuff which the data system team has been working on?
So hopefully we get a stream of a lot of the CIDs that are currently, either accessible through crawling the DHT or watching BitSwap, or we've got a lot of ways of sort of getting views into some various subsets of the CIDs in IPFS. There's a plausible path for some of that also ending up in the index. And it'll be yet another view and yet another source that you can then crawl by using that index ingestion protocol, and you make something that looks like an indexer node, but instead is using that stream of provided CIDs to ask for them and then do a full text index on them or other sorts of things. I think we're likely to see that large providers are the first that are most motivated to adopt an index-like output. So as like in the current one that you may have noticed recently is the DHT right now is getting a lot of new CIDs getting published to it by Web3 storage. As it loads and pins a lot of data, that means all of that data is getting put into the DHT. And so the DHT is starting to grow a little bit faster because of that. And they're looking for ways to not add quite so much volume to the DHT. And so they may, and they've got sort of one IPFS cluster that has a lot of SIDs. So you may find that their content becomes available to the indexer. And so those sorts of, partial views, it's another strategy.
Great, thanks. Yeah, anyone else got any questions they would like to have as part of the recording? It does help to clarify things if there's a bit of discussion, so feel free to raise them, and if not, we can stop the recording. Great, thanks guys. I'll stop the recording.